It's my feel-good breakfast show.
It's your Feel Good Breakfast Show, and if you just stepped in, I really missed you, and I'm glad you're here right now. My name's Carl, this is Expresso, and we're continuing our discussion with a lawyer and director at legalese.co.za, Aiton Stern, as he breaks down how organizations in South Africa need to comply with the Protection of Personal Information Act, a big thing these days, personal information. Now, just to kind of recap you, we discussed a lot about the act so far, but more importantly, we need to get into the people who are responsible in an organization to actually implement the act, and more importantly, with regard to these roles and responsibilities of these people, so that we can feel safer with regard to our personal information wherever we go. Now, Aiton, let's talk about the people responsible for implementing the POPI Act.
Okay, so everyone is responsible for this, in fact. So
right.
If you're a company, you have to nominate what's called a data representative. And this is someone in the company whose job it is to kind of oversee and make sure that POPI is complied with. If you're a company that uses data in a much more serious way, like a financial institution as an example, then you would need a data protection officer, and that's a person who's got much bigger responsibilities. But certainly and you should think about it, everyone should think about their daily job. If you ever find yourself accepting data from clients, recording data, names, addresses, characteristics of people, whatever it is, then you need to go and chat to your company and say, well, we need to be complying with POPI, because everyone in the company is responsible for this.
Okay, everybody's responsibility, which makes a lot of sense to me, but I believe there's a deadline looming for everybody to comply. What is that deadline?
So POPI is actually enforced now, and companies are supposed to be getting up to date. One of the things that companies are supposed to do is put in place a data handling policy, and that's a policy for their staff and how their staff are supposed to deal with POPI. By the 31st of June this year, so the beginning of July, POPI will be enforced, and companies are going to need to be responsible by then. So you've got this little period now to kind of get prepped. That's prepping your online terms and conditions. That's your data handling policy. That's a few other things. There are some bits of POPI, there's some sub-regulations of POPI that aren't enforced yet. Those will come in the coming months. So 31st of June, everyone needs to be compliant.
Compliance, very, very important, and I think you've got some time to learn some of the steps and constituents of the POPI Act. And I believe there are these 8 rules that people need to kind of track through just to make sure that we are all compliant. Can you take us through those 8 rules?
I can take you through some of them for sure. So there are these kind of 8 rules behind POPI to show, well, what are we actually trying to do here? Like, what's the point of this? And so, for example, we've got accountability. So anyone accepting data needs to be accountable for that data. We can't just say, well, we collected everyone's names and addresses and their whereabouts of their children, and now we left it on a piece of paper somewhere, we don't know where it is. So accountability is a big one. Limitations, data processing limitations. So you must only process data to the extent that you need to. You must limit the amount that you're processing data. You can't grab a whole lot of data from a person when you only need just their name. Then there's also data specification. So if, Carl, you say to me, listen, I need your email address because I want to invite you to my birthday party, you can't take my email address and use it to send me a newsletter or send me a mailer of some sort.
Oh, that happens often, now that I think about it.
So data specification, so we need to be specific. We also need to be open with what data we're collecting. So if you're collecting data from people, if you're a company or an online site, or even if you're collecting it physically, you need to be open about what you're collecting. And then there are these other sorts of rules, and it's all about making sure that we as people feel okay giving our data over, and we know that whoever we're giving our data to is going to take care of it.
Yes.
Just think about in your daily life how much data you're giving away to banks, insurance companies, any company that you deal with every time you walk into a building, school, your children. We see cases of people taking the addresses of where children are or what schools they go to and just being careless with that. It's dangerous.
It is.
So, these rules tell us a lot about what we're supposed to do with this data.
I don't mean to be a negative reinforcer here, but there are some penalties for those who are not compliant with POPI. Is that correct? What are some of the penalties that organizations can face?
Cool. So there are monetary and jail time penalties for breaching these things. If you don't have your data handling policy up in place by the beginning of June, I doubt you're going to go to jail. But if you're a financial institution or a site collecting mass data and you haven't complied, well, then there can be monetary or financial or jail time. The other thing which you can have is other companies may not be able to deal with you.
Okay.
So if you are not compliant with Poppy, then someone else is not going to be able to deal with you and give you business because that's going to affect their Poppy compliance. And of course, there's the mass public fallout is if you get something wrong and if if you have a data breach, it can be very embarrassing and lose a lot of trust from clients. So, this is one of those things that government is actually keep catching up to society. People are insisting on our data being handled better. And so, you've got your government and monetary penalties, but I think much more severe is just the lack of trust that people have in your organization.
Ethan, thank you so much for answering all these questions. I think that we've planted a very important poppy seed for every organization to be compliant at the end of June. So make sure you do. And if there are any more questions, this man is at legalese.co.za.